The universe of Cyberpunk 2077 is gritty, dark, and often incredibly depressing. Just like our nostalgia for past times, the allure of the future in Cyberpunk when it comes to technological and cybernetic advances certainly dull when we look at how most of us and our loved ones would be living in terrible and abject conditions. After all, the future is supposed to be shiny with flying cars, robots, and maybe, just maybe, a better society with wonderful healthcare where injured people wouldn't be afraid to call for an ambulance due to fear of cost. In this lore video, we'll be examining the healthcare systems in Cyberpunk 2077, how they work, and why they are the way they are, using both the game and the Cyberpunk RPG sourcebooks. This will mark our first foray into the violent lore of Cyberpunk 2077, and I want to thank you all for joining me on this venture. If you like game lore, definitely check out my previous videos on Starfield, Armored Core 6, and Assassin's Creed, or subscribe to the channel to keep up to date on more Cyberpunk lore. In order to understand a system like healthcare ordained by society at large, one must try to understand the society. In the world of Cyberpunk, most illnesses or diseases have seemed to mostly faded away, at least in the conscience of the public, with the exception of bioengineered weapons such as the Wasting Plague, which killed 14 million humans in 1999, and the more serious diseases like AIDS and AIDS 2. Curiously, in the year 2077, there seems to have been a costly breakthrough for even multiple sclerosis.
Announced a breakthrough in the fight against multiple sclerosis. MS is one of the few diseases that cannot be cured by replacing the affected tissue with implant technology. But the experts at Biodyne have created nanites that, when injected into the spinal cord, provide long-term uninterrupted repair to the neural tissue. The cost of this cutting-edge therapy treatment has been listed at €700,000 per month.
Much of the emphasis associated with illness seems to be mostly on things related to the usage of cyberware implants, colloquially known as chrome, resulting in things like cyberpsychosis, tissue damage, and other serious side effects, particularly when implants go haywire. But why are so many people in Night City and the rest of the world getting so many implants? On the surface, it seems to be a very extreme version of keeping up with the Joneses, in which people observe their neighbors getting the latest material purchases and feeling animalistically compelled to match or one-up them. Instead of new TVs, cars, or the usual symbols of status, however, it comes down to the latest body parts, implants, weapons, armor, and tech gear, which complicates things especially when it comes to personal safety. After all, if your neighbors have gorilla arms or elbows that shoot RPGs, that definitely puts you at a disadvantage in your community should things turn violent. Not only are you falling behind in wealth or social status, but you're falling behind physically, which, depending on your line of work or the environment in which you live, that's pretty bad. As said in Cyberpunk Red, corporations and governments began to employ cybernetically enhanced warriors to patrol the streets and fight their wars. People with cybernetic enhancements found themselves becoming impatient with the unenhanced, and there to the cyber a painfully slow pace. Cybernetic speed also allowed the rate of change or engagement with the rush of a shifting world of endless information to move still faster, leading to greater levels of technoshock in society. People began to show signs of psychotic breaks, eventually culminating in a plague of cybernetically driven, murderous rampages called cyberpsychosis. And so, one more log was added to the inferno consuming society at the end of the 20th century. There is also immense corporate pressure if we dig a bit deeper. For example, the shard that can be found in Night City reads, "A century ago, employers could impose specific dress codes, hairstyle regulations, and piercing and tattoo bans. Many even pressed their employees to maximize productivity, often in the violation of the law, such as through anti-pregnancy policies. At the time, however, deeper involvement with employees' bodies was simply impossible, legal or otherwise. But with the advent of cyberware, employers in the second half of the 21st century have imposed requirements for skin, bone, muscle, organ, and eye replacements in order to improve performance and workplace effectiveness. In extreme cases, security sector employees are commonly urged to undergo so-called full-body conversions, or full cyborgization. It's also safe to assume that the political levers of the world are mainly being pulled by corporations rather than civilian governments.
Corps have long controlled our lives, taken lots, and now they're after our souls.
Might be right. Can't really argue with you there.
V, I've declared war not because capitalism's a thorn in my side or out of nostalgia for an America gone by. This war's a people's war against a system that spiraled out of our control. It's a war against the fucking forces of entropy. Understand?
Clearly, there is a hard focus on profit and only profit. If 100 gonks die for Arasaka stocks to go up, so be it. If you can make more eddies charging ludicrous prices for emergency visits, why not? If it's a choice between saving €1 million or feeding the homeless, it's obvious we saved the €1 million. Lastly, the societies in Cyberpunk are just beyond cruel, which is exemplified by several examples, including a net site called Vote for Humanitarian Aid, which allows anyone to vote for exactly where aid funding goes to, and the vote predictably results in refugees dying, according to an in-game broadcast. A good reference in regards to the senseless violence that takes place every minute of every day, not just in Night City, but all over the planet, is shown by a news broadcast that goes over the crime rates of Antarctica.
In Northern Europe, the humanitarian crisis has worsened. Refugees from flooded regions in Belgium and the Netherlands continue to pour into Scandinavia. Sweden has responded with force, sinking over a dozen refugee vessels in recent weeks. Despite humanitarian efforts, nearly 60 people have been killed. Have we found heaven on Earth? Permanent human settlement on Antarctica is celebrating 10 years today. A wealth of natural resources hidden under the ice has spurred on the continent's rapid economic development. Though some environmental degradation has occurred as a result, inhabitants of the South Pole are still enjoying life as Antarctica's first dollhouse was recently opened. But perhaps most appealing to locals and newcomers alike is the astonishingly low crime level. Antarcticans enjoy a murder rate of only 70 per 100,000 residents. Thank you for watching N54 News. We'll see you next time.
This number isn't the only one offered, as the Militech-backed claim of the new United States of America, or NUSA, having a lower crime rate than Night City is shown on the net as well. The fact that there's even executions being broadcast live for entertainment American Idol style is in itself disturbing, with the show called Execution Time allowing people to vote for the methods of execution, including decapitation, lethal injection, hanging, drowning, and electrocution for felons. And as for Night City itself,
7,103 a year ago to just... Hold on.
There's immense environmental pollution, quality of life is shot to hell, and the systems of power want to milk as much as they can out of the masses, while of course offering what should be the minimum standards for the preservation of human life. As a shard titled Healthcare in Traffic says, second-rate equipment, undertrained medical professionals, and high death rates. This is the best Night City's public emergency services have to offer. In addition to poor performance metrics, so too has their public image suffered. Scandals involving city EMTs colluding with scavengers have gone from rare to commonplace. Recent cuts in municipal healthcare spending have led to the outright collapse of a medical system that already underperformed by most standards in the developed world. Ironically, this so-called reform resulted in a greater drain of doctors, nurses, paramedics, and dispatchers from the public sector. Where quality healthcare was spotty before, now too is even calling the emergency hotline. Should you be among the lucky to reach a dispatcher, expect more than a half hour for an ambulance to arrive. And should you not bleed out before reaching the hospital, you're even less likely to find an available bed. Recent data show a survival rate for traffic accidents in Night City at a meager 17%. For comparison, the average survival rate for traffic accidents across all trauma team policies is 91%. Response time is guaranteed to never exceed 3 minutes. Heaven on earth? No. The minimum we all deserve. Something to keep in mind as you plan your personal budget. Purchase Trauma Team's Platinum level coverage for the cost of gold. and safeguard your life today. Limited time offer. Cyberpunk tries to show such things are just the results of an extremely capitalistic corporate society, which only focuses on selfish gain at either a collective or individual level, rather than emphasizing humanity or compassion. In our reality, if the aforementioned breakthrough by biodyne scientists in helping those with MS occurred and the corporation wanted to charge $700,000 a month per patient, there would be a huge outcry, maybe governmental hearings at the very least in some countries, going over why the corporation is charging that much. The combined societal and corporate influence in driving this unhealthy consumerism, which is shown intensely in the Edgerunner show, with the incessant stacking of everyday bills and charges, never mind the taxes, naturally result in a healthcare system, at least in Night City, that ends up ignoring anyone who can't afford getting healthcare, because everybody else is already squeezing all the eddies they can out of everyday people, which leaves little room for the healthcare system to be flexible, at least officially. Now that we've covered as to why healthcare may be the way it is in Cyberpunk, we're going to examine the entities that facilitate it within the universe, because not everyone and everything is the same. Perhaps the most prominent entity is going to be Trauma Team International, which itself may warrant its own lore video. Starting out as a small company in Seattle, Washington, sometime before the year 2020, it skyrocketed to prominence once crime rates and violent incidents worsened in the former United States of America. Rapid expansion of its business spread to other regions, including Europe and Asia, and their professional services were so sought after that even when the company put out a reactive policy during the Fourth Corporate War that they would charge more for people being picked up if they were within half a kilometer of a gunshot, their services were still overwhelmed. By the year 2077, after undergoing numerous fractures and corporate reorganizations, Trauma Team International is now an even bigger powerhouse with the best equipment and personnel that holds contracts with Arasaka, Nightcorp, Biotechnica, Kiroshi, and Militech. A typical Trauma Team squad by the year 2077 uses a highly advanced Atlas AV or Aerodyne vehicle equipped with the best possible medical technology. Team composition is usually made up of 1 to 2 pilots in an isolated cockpit, at least 2 security specialists who aren't afraid to use violent force to secure their clients, and 2 emergency medical technicians who are also trained as military paramedics. Trauma Team's website under its medical services page elaborates that they offer 24/7 emergency AV dispatch, which includes a reflex booster-ready pilot, armed safety experts, and military-trained paramedics. If a client is in danger, an AV squad receives their GPS signal, allowing them to arrive on the scene within minutes to provide protection and treatment. Reaction time and additional perks are dependent on your insurance package. Meanwhile, inpatient care at Trauma Team facilities includes access to surgical nanites, specialized antibodies, and cryogenic chambers. Trauma Team also offers their own pharmaceuticals and reanimators, as well as surplus implants from their suppliers. Interestingly, we can read more about the Trauma Team insurance policies available for purchase on their mainnet website on their premium package page in Cyberpunk 2077, which reads: emergency patient transport, surgery and nanosurgery, post-trauma rehabilitation, plastic surgery on demand, free checkup with your Ripperdoc, up to a 90% discount on prescriptions. These services listed are only covered by the most expensive tier of Trauma Team packages, which is Platinum, while Silver and Gold do not cover these, which obviously pushes people to try to get Platinum for an exorbitant fee. And this is why often characters in Cyberpunk will comment on targets having Trauma Team Platinum. While we don't know exactly how much Trauma Team Platinum costs, we do know from Cyberpunk 2020 that the full body coverage was about €500 a month, in addition to other expenses like fuel being used to recover customers, while the corporate coverage package costed 1,500 eddies a month, with the corporate executive coverage costing 12,000 eddies a month for a guaranteed response time of 7 minutes. The most expensive package in either Cyberpunk 2020 or Cyberpunk Red was the high priority package, which costed €34,000 per month while having no annual subscription discounts, unlike the other packages. Based on this data and probable inflation, we can conclude that in 2077, the Platinum package can cost anywhere between €30,000 to €40,000 per month, which is absolutely insane. While perhaps Trauma Team International's services could be seen as just neutral professional force at best in the eyes of corpos, even that is doubtful, as rumors of Trauma Team farming biodata or personal information with the financially vulnerable through surgical codes have been circulating. CityMed is another healthcare organization described in Cyberpunk 2020, but in contrast to Trauma Team International, CityMed is an organization of doctors who focus on providing free healthcare to low-income neighborhoods. It's sort of Cyberpunk's equivalent to the Red Cross, but it actually has a very sinister side. According to Countdown to the Dark Future number 22, CityMed is a not-for-profit which offers medical services to those who can't afford it. They function thanks to donations and receive quiet support from several corporations who realize having a base level of care available to the destitute can help prevent a pandemic, something which can harm even their bottom line. CityMed is run out of Miami, but has chapters in most major cities. The majority of staff work on a volunteer basis, including some Trauma Team medtechs. Trauma Team recognizes the publicity value of their employees volunteering for CityMed and encourages them to do so. CityMed offers emergency surgery, medicine, vaccinations, and examinations to those who need it, but have a policy of not offering such services to wanted criminals, edge runners with a bad reputation, or members of particularly vicious gangs. It's unclear if CityMed made it to the year 2077 like Trauma Team International did, and if they did, they certainly do not have a visible presence in Night City when we ventured through it, unless the healthcare that failed David Martinez's mother in Edge Runners is an allusion to CityMed, or perhaps a similar service. Whatever the case, it's quite depressing to think about a charity medical service being used as a corporate tax write-off and a valve to alleviate some pressure on public health for the sake of corporate profit. There also appears to be another public form of health service with non-Trauma Team surface ambulances, although these tend to also have a high risk of EMTs coordinating with scavengers or scavs to literally plunder injured people for their cyberware implants. And if it's the same public healthcare service that charged David Martinez extra eddies just to visit his mother or to properly cremate her body, it may just be a dilapidated public system rife with corruption and bureaucratic inconsistencies. In Edge Runners, the Trauma Team that left David and his mother behind at the scene of their incident commented to leave them for the city Meatwagons. This may be an allusion to another potential healthcare entity in Cyberpunk by the year 2077 called R.E.O. Meatwagon Incorporated, a Trauma Team rival corporation that provides similar paramedical services. This healthcare corporation started out not only taking care of patients, but also dealing with corpses in the shady organ harvesting business. Ripperdocs are also another group of healthcare professionals that vary in skill, professionalism, and reputation, as evident by the difference between Victor Vector and Finn Fingers Gastat. Technically, many of them are not even medical doctors as much as they are hobbyists, at least outside of the corporations. As stated by the Cyberpunk 2077 database entry, a Ripperdoc lies somewhere between a surgeon, techie, and tattoo artist. If you're lucky, you pay them a visit to get yourself chipped with the latest implant on the market because you can afford it. If you're unlucky, a friend will drop you off at their clinic in pieces and hopefully they can put you back together. People usually have their favorite clinics and trust rippers that know their bodies better than they do themselves. It's definitely not worth going out on a limb, no pun intended, and looking for the cheapest deal, especially in Little China or past Rancho Coronado, where some asshole will chip you a second or third hand piece of junk with a nasty virus thrown in free of charge. Corps obviously don't have to hunt for the best deals because they have their own corporate rippers. Their high-quality services are free, their clinics smell like a hospital ward, and they have the picture-perfect smiles of brain dance stars, the whole package. What's not to like? Unless, of course, you don't trust the people you work for enough to let them have access to your brain. While we have focused on mostly North America or Night City in this video, a shard titled Emergency on Demand has this to say about the existence of other healthcare systems by rebuking Trauma Team International and the general healthcare system in North America. How did it happen? When and why did we as a society decide that human life is a commodity, a luxury? My mother passed away at 45. She still had decades of life to live until it was all stolen from her by common pneumonia. If she had held even the cheapest trauma team policy, she could have been cured within an hour, but she couldn't afford it. My mother died 5 months before her scheduled appointment with our family practitioner. The idea of privatized healthcare is deeply ingrained in our public psyche. Already in 2020, there was widespread consensus that €500 a month was a fair price for trauma team insurance. Health wasn't something you were given, it was something you earned. The private system may not be perfect, but there's no alternative, we thought. Bullshit. Now cross the Pacific Ocean to the USSR, where they also have highly trained medical technicians, high-precision nanosurgical suites, specialized antibodies, intravenous probes, the list goes on. Emergency airlifts using modern AVs equipped with cryotonic chambers, they have those too. The difference then? They don't leave their people to die on the streets, at the store, in their homes. They don't force anyone to purchase their lives from a corporation as if they're the ones who own it. Public healthcare isn't some unachievable utopia, it is a reality. Trauma Team, on the other hand, treats its policyholders as both potential patients to be treated and potential products to be bought. They save lives only because there is profit in it. A saved life is a returning customer. Client death can also bring in fiscal gains in the form of organ and implant resale, though of course in regulated, smaller sums. An emergency care provider can't afford to give its managers reasons to deliberately kill off its clientele base for short-term windfalls. Surely, you ask, these medical professionals are also guided by their Hippocratic oaths. Please. The Soviet Union possessing free public healthcare is certainly notable, although it has its own share of problems, including scarcity of resources and deadly environmental pollution by the year 2077. While healthcare isn't mentioned much in the Pacific Rim sourcebook, there is a notable Singaporean corporation that specialized in both traditional and modern medicine. Tiger Medicines Corporation had regional offices in Hong Kong, Night City, Kobe, Bombay, Bangkok, Shanghai, and Hanoi, with almost 20,000 employees worldwide, competing against Biotechnica in the medical field. The last we heard of TMC was that they had brought up large tracts of the Borneo and South China rainforest for research, and we can presume that they still exist by the year 2077. We also briefly mentioned Antarctica earlier, particularly with its own remarkably low crime rate, at least compared to Night City and other parts of the world. But there's no doubt that with the increasing prosperity of the Antarctica settlement mentioned in 2077, that medical and healthcare entities are now swinging their sights on the continent to lay down the foundations of corporate healthcare. For the time being, this is about all we know of the decrepit healthcare systems in the universe of Cyberpunk. All of it is terrifying and depressing, and it should be telling, at least for some of us, that we can certainly sympathize with the plights of those in said universe, as many in our reality are financially coerced or staved off by the economics of profit-focused healthcare. While certainly satirizing places like the United States or other countries, Cyberpunk doesn't really feel too far off as far as the themes of helplessness and greed go when it comes to dealing with the circumstances surrounding our health and well-being today. So perhaps that is the most terrifying part about the lore. Thank you so much for watching. If you want more Cyberpunk or game lore, definitely subscribe to the channel to help me get more content like this out there. If you want, definitely recommend a next topic. I'll be delving into all things Cyberpunk, including cyberpsychosis, United Korea, and other things not too well known about the Cyberpunk universe in the very near future, and I hope you'll join me in this adventure. Until next time, chooms, stay Nova.